Welcome, everybody. My name is Rebecca Cooper. I am the Director of Communications and Research for the Representation Project, which is a nonprofit organization founded by Jennifer Siebel Newsom that uses films and campaigns to challenge harmful gender norms and stereotypes. And this interview is part of a larger campaign called Boys Will Be Boys, which is it's a campaign to expose how traditional masculinity restricts men and boys, and also to create a space where they can be uplifted and reach their full human potential. So Boys Will Be Boys means that boys and men can be anything and everything they want to be without the constraints of restrictive masculinity, which is really important to us in the work we're doing here. And today I'm really excited to have Brad Gage here, and I'm excited to be the person interviewing the one and only Brad Gage. Let me tell you about him. So Brad is a New York-based producer, director, writer, and public speaker who focuses on modern masculinity. His credits include content for ABC, Hulu, Fullscreen, and Cheddar News. He produced 2 podcasts named by Apple among their best of the year, Explain Things to Me in 2015, and also Good Inside with Dr. Becky. He currently hosts and produces the series Real Feels, which is about men, gender, and mental health. And he serves as the director of Entrepreneur Magazine's media studio. So virtual round of applause, everybody. Thank you and welcome, Brad Gage. It's so good to have you here.
I am so darn excited, Rebecca. Thank you.
Me too. Let's hop right in. So my first question, and we asked this to everybody, but I think it's so important to kind of contextualize you and how you got here. So what is your personal story and what was your path to a career promoting healthy masculinity for boys and men? And when did you know this was going to be a major part of your life?
It took a while, I think. I mean, being a man growing up within American masculinity, it is this kind of fish swimming in water situation. You're not aware of what's affecting you and why and how. You know, media literacy was not something that I knew about until actually a fantastic high school teacher named Gail DeClark. But I grew up in Wisconsin, wanting to be as quintessentially male as possible, according to the movies and TV shows that I watched, you know, playing sports, being a funny guy. I eventually joined a fraternity. I got a lot of my empowerment from the guys respecting me for getting laid and stuff like that. You know, these were the important things. And so I had empathy for other people, but I was completely unaware of the personal experiences of women in my life. And so that continued through my 20s. I was friends with a very charismatic screenwriter who I later found out had sexually abused some friends of mine and other women in my community.
Wow.
And the aftermath of that kind of had me reassessing what it meant to be a passive bystander, which was a term I didn't know before, and why men abuse women and just the psychology behind that. So I was trying to figure out what to do with these feelings around this information. And so I educated myself on books and podcasts. Some of them I have here. I mean, actually, the executive director of the Representation Project, Caroline Heldman's book,
Yes.
The Sexy Lie, which I just found out before this. Rebecca, you are the dedication for this book. I didn't know that until 5 minutes ago. A book called Patriarchy Blues by Frederick Joseph. And then the big one for me was a book called Boys and Sex by Peggy Orenstein. So that was how I kind of figured out what all of this meant, and then started making content around what I call the bro code, you know, the rules that kind of tell us how to be a man in American society. So that's how I got to where I am now. And for me, it's like, I can't think of anything better or more fruitful to do than just talk about this for the rest of my life, I guess.
Yeah, I can understand that. I feel the same way about this work and just, you know, a lot of the stuff we do is involving women and uplifting women's representation, right? It's so important to talk about how this impacts men and boys. And last week we had an awesome interview with Dr. Gary Barker, who's the executive director of Ecomundo. And they recently released a report that 2/3 of men ages 18 to 23 reported that they felt like nobody really knows them, which was just astounding. And there's also some other like horrifying stats in there too. And we know that the Surgeon General has declared loneliness as an epidemic, especially among men. So can you tell us more about the male loneliness epidemic and what's going on there?
I mean, I think people hear that term, male loneliness epidemic, and they might feel like it's overblown or something, but all you got to do if you're a guy is check in with yourself and your friends and your family, or whoever, whatever gender you are, you can see it right now. And I think there's a ton of reasons why that's happening. But I mean, yeah, looking at the stats, right? Like the one you mentioned, and also this American time use survey from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics released this stat that people's time spent alone in America has increased by 8 hours a week
Wow.
since 2020, since 2013. So that's not just because of pandemic. And in the last 30 years, the share of Americans with 5 or more close friends has declined from 63% of Americans to 38% of Americans. So that's like
Wow. Massive.
huge difference. And that's one of the things I like to talk about is like, I challenge everybody out there to think about how many guys, or I guess the men out there, how many guys do you feel comfortable reaching out to when something big happens in your life? Do you have 5? If you have 5, you're doing great. But I do think that clearly a good amount of people are not feeling that type of community naturally, I guess, right now.
Yeah. Wow. That is a massive dip. And I smiled when you said American Time Use Survey because I'm a data nerd. I just felt like I need to explain why I'm all geeked out about terrible statistics. But yes,
Well, I have more if you want them. I don't like.
yes, I mean, I'm not sure if in the audience, let us know how you feel about data stories, but please, for my sake, I love them. So speaking of the data, can you tell us some more about what are the primary drivers of the male loneliness epidemic? Do we know? So you mentioned that there's been big shifts in the last 10 years prior to the pandemic. Do we know what is causing folks to be spending 8 more hours alone?
I think, it's a combination of kind of the depletion of community that we've just kind of had more often than not in the past. And I'm not a huge proponent of religion, but they're going to church, having those people. I mean, I grew up Catholic. You're going to church every week. At least you're seeing those folks, and you're part of that community, and you expand. There's, I think, a lack of enthusiasm for the same types of adult sports, organizations, volunteer work, and then also remote work. You're just not interacting with people as much if you're not seeing them in person. It is a completely different reaction. But for me, for men, I think it's all kind of a result of the tenets of the bro code, like not asking for help, feeling like you shouldn't need help from anybody, taking care of everything yourself. And then also seeing like community and vulnerability as something more feminine, AKA weak in the modality of, patriarchy. And so that influence we're starting to see even more. I mean, you watch Barbie, you watch a lot of video essayists like myself. It's clearer and clearer the effects that bro code and patriarchy have had on us. And a lot of it is just, yeah, not putting the extra effort in to be a part of a community, and then not understanding why we're feeling lonely, we're feeling depressed, our rate of suicide is nearly 4 times more than women. That's what happens when as we grow older, especially, we just don't have people around us that love us and we love and we kind of want to connect with.
Yeah, another staggering statistic. And I work from home. My partner works from home, and we joke about feeling under socialized when we go out and run into a friend. We don't know what to talk about anymore. We all feel it to an extent, but yeah, absolutely magnified for the men and boys who aren't in community. Also, last week speaking to Dr. Barker, he mentioned the importance of just asking the men and boys in your life, "How are you doing?" and not letting them just say fine, but like really digging in deeper. And that stuck with me and has changed the way I've been interacting. It's so simple, but has really had me pause and think about the ways that I start conversations with the boys and men in my life. So question for you, what can we do? I know you mentioned before we started the webinar that you've got strategies, but what are some strategies and what can we do to address the loneliness epidemic?
I think for anyone who's feeling like either they're lonely or don't even know what to call it. They're feeling like they're in a spot where they wish they had more friends. They wish they had more to do. The first step, like in most things, is just recognizing that there is an issue to address and saying, yes, no, this is something that I definitely want to change. It's not going great right now. And sometimes that could be helpful if, a friend sees it, recognizes it, a partner recognizes it. But I think I always like to stress that any of these moments starting conversations with folks that you feel might be struggling should not be gotcha moments. They should not be moments that evoke shame or are pointing a finger as much. I like to say less gotcha moments and more I got you moments. More moments where you are supportive, where you're giving resources, but you're not telling somebody they should be doing this, they should be doing that, because that just evokes more shame. You just maybe presenting options, and that's what I like to do in some of my videos. And I had one where I suggested kind of an exercise for men, with 3 questions to break out of the loneliness cycle, and that's just first visualizing, like, think about what your ideal friend group looks like.
Hmm.
Like if you're just you don't have anybody to talk to, is like, what does that even look like? You don't know where to start visualizing, what who are these people? What kind of events would you like to be doing with them? That's the second part. What do you want to even do? Because this is where you'll find folks, and joining in an improv class or a cooking class or an intramural league, or going to church or going to temple or a mosque, going these places, maybe that's where you are going to find your people. And so that's the second part. And then the third part is, even more than what you want to do with your friends, ask yourself how you want to feel when you're with these people. Because again, this you might think it's woo woo kind of visualization, but you create your own life and reality. So it's like, I want to feel like blank when I'm with these folks. I want to be laughing. I want to be seen and heard and understood. Then you're going to go towards that and kind of make that real once you kind of go down the road. But it's work.
Right.
I think a lot of us think having friends shouldn't have to be work. Well, it wasn't work when we were in school because we were around people all the time. But now it is work, just like a romantic relationship. And you kind of just got to be brave for your own good. And I just moved to New York a year and a half ago with not that many friends here. And it is one of those things where I scheduled a lot of drink things and met a random person and just was like, hey, do you want to get lunch? And they might say no, they might ghost you, but you got to take those swings or else you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, that's great advice, I think, for everybody. Um, it and I love the idea of visualizing what you want your friend group to look like, your community to look like, and how do you want to feel. And it segues perfectly into my next question too, because I think so much of what we're able to imagine is limited by what we've seen in media. And we know that's, we talk about that all the time in terms of, if you can see it, you can be it. And so I wonder how does media play a role in this? And before I ask you my question too, just thinking about like how disappointing it was to become a 30-year-old, and realize that not every 30-year-old has a friend group that lives in the same apartment building. That that's just the idea that I've got kind of one-off friendships from different parts of my life, and they're very meaningful to me, but they don't look like Friends or How I Met Your Mother, and it's different than I thought it would be. So can you tell us more about what as a content creator, and what tropes and stereotypes are limiting, for men when it comes to friendship?
Well, I mean, again, something that uh, Dr. Caroline Heldman talks about in The Sexy Lie, and there's a lot of books about this. Like, it's everywhere, right? We're told how to be a man by print ads and magazines,
Right.
billboards, how to view women as objects and ownership of bodies and all this stuff. But I think that the point you were talking about, like Friends. I would love to say, like, Friends is easier. Sex in the City, Entourage, these are easier. Those, like, sometimes you watch a show, you're like, oh, I'm hanging out with my friends. I love these folks,
Hmm.
and it feels like more and more. That's why scrolling and bed rotting or watching Netflix, it is just an easier way to feel community, but that's unfortunately like a false promise, because yeah, that's not how friend groups are, but they can be. but you gotta facilitate that. You gotta harvest that. You gotta create events and environments for those relationships to thrive, and so that you can have those types of nights that you're seeking from, if you're watching these shows. But for me growing up, as a young boy, I was drawn to like rebels, James Dean, Han Solo, people who were strong and tough and didn't need anybody. That was what was cool. I was obsessed with Star Wars. But a great example I like to use is one of my favorite YouTubers, Pop Culture Detective is the name of the channel. They pointed out a few years ago that in Star Wars, like the Jedi promote the idea of hiding your feelings in order to
Interesting.
protect those who you love, which is not helpful and not a good tactic uh, to go through life, because loving openly and being direct and caring is actually how you protect your emotional well-being. And it's, if we're all like Jedi, that's I guess in a way it's like that could have been leading as well to this loneliness epidemic. Um, and that's one of the most popular series of all time. And that's in our heads, you know,
Right.
push down your anger, push down your emotions, hide them, Luke. Like that's what we've been learning. I
Wow.
looked up to that so much.
Wow. I also love Star Wars, and it's one of the ways that I connect with the men in my family too. And that's so obvious. I just never thought of it that way. But yeah, wow. And it makes me think of what you mentioned too at the beginning of this webinar of media literacy and how important it is to be able to decode the media you're getting. I think how different it would be if the first time I was seeing Star Wars, we were having those conversations around how problematic that is, and what that means for masculinity, the Marlboro man trope, and why we see it everywhere. Yeah, that's fascinating. This is a curveball question for you, but have you witnessed any media recently that's getting it right, or do you have recommendations for great depictions of men's friendship in media?
I do. I'm gonna pull up my letterbox because I created some lists
Oh,
here.
awesome. Okay, great. And I'll tell everybody too, while you're doing that, please put your questions in the Q&A.
Oh yeah.
Time to do that. Send them in. We've got a couple great ones in there.
Well, I male friendships are still, they're getting, I think it's getting better. Like there was this really interesting episode of the show, uh the Little Dicky show. I forget what that one's called on FX, but let me see here. Um Dave, on the show Dave, there's an episode of like this kind of freewheeling masculine friendship over the course of a day with him and Benny Blanco. I've just seen that recently, but that came to mind. But I mean, I think positive masculinity on film, like just in general, I think a good one is I Love You Man, the movie with Paul Rudd and Jason
Mm,
Segel, fantastic. And then not as much like male friendship, but just positive masculinity. Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the Mr. Rogers movie. He's
yes.
like he is the king to me of positive
Yeah.
masculinity. The Florida Project. I don't know if you've seen that film with
Yeah.
Willem Dafoe,
Yeah.
Scott Pilgrim, Moonlight, and I just think everyone should see Barbie. I mean, it's Ken he goes both to the less helpful and the more helpful in the film. So those would be some examples of positive masculinity in media that I've seen recently.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I can't there. Oh, I was gonna say Mr. Rogers. Um, I agree. What a king of positive masculinity. And also our nephews have been watching Daniel Tiger, which is I didn't realize until I started paying attention, but that's a character from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and it's kind of a spinoff. And wow, it just in terms of healthy masculinity in children's content, it was really, really sweet to see. And our nephews always give us Daniel Tiger hugs now. And it's just like, yeah, so I would totally recommend that if you've got young kids. Um, okay. My next
I would
question.
also I would
Yeah.
also really quick shout out. It's now off the air, but there's a show on Max or HBO Max called The Other Two, and there's a character named Lance
Okay.
who's the boyfriend of one of the leads, and that blew me away. This guy was the most thoughtful representation. I think he's originally earlier on in the series. You think he's a bit of like, to use the term, like himbo, like he's airhead a little bit, and
Mm,
then 5, 6 episodes in, you realize this guy is thoughtful. There is equity in his relationship. Super empathetic, And that was like great writing.
Cool. Okay, that's the other two on Max, you said?
The other two, yeah.
Okay, we'll compile all these recommendations and send them out, including the books you mentioned too, and send them out to everybody after this. My next question for you is a little personal, but I think it is something that is just really awesome to think about, and we've been asking all of our expert interviewees. So the question is, what is one thing that you wish you knew when you were a boy or a young man about masculinity? And if you had the opportunity to tell your younger self, what would you share with them?
I mean, the biggest thing is to not look at my emotions as a weakness. I mean, emotions, just like all humans have them, but like the idea of strong vulnerability, um, crying rocks. I mean, it's like it as a guy, it feels weird to even say these things still for me. Like the amount that I've done this work, but it's like it feels amazing, you know, because you're connecting directly with your heart. So I think like I had a very strong aversion to the idea of like therapy for my whole life up until I was like 33. And so like, you know, maybe release that a little bit, young Brad. And then also, uh, you know, if I have always thought of myself as kind of a brave person, but like to understand there are moments where bravery is tested, like, and that we all see them in different types of bystandership. So I would suggest like young Brad, be an active bystander if you see someone doing something that is making a person uncomfortable or makes you uncomfortable or unsafe. And that takes a lot to step up and do that, you know. But Esther Perel in 2017 said that like in the situation of Me Too moments like sexual abuse, she'd love to see Me Too situations look like drunk driving situations now, where we all, if we're at an event or you're seeing something, everyone now collectively agrees that we intervene before somebody takes the keys and drives if they're drunk. So that's what we need to do with circumstances where we're witnessing or observing a possible abuse scenario. I think we're slowly getting there, but that would be like a big thing to tell him.
Yeah, wow. Bystander intervention training is so important. And it kind of it applies to all of the campaigns that we run. We have our End Rape campaign that's been ongoing as well, and talking about the ways that rape culture is perpetuated and how it keeps people from understanding how and when they need to be standing up. And later in this series, we'll be interviewing Dr. Jackson Katz, who has an incredible bystander intervention training for young people and young men. Yeah, thank you
Shout
for
out to Jackson Katz, Macho Paradox, huge influence on the work I'm doing too. I think I like two of my essays on my channel. I quote that book. It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple questions. Well, we have many questions in the Q&A. Let's see. There are two of them that kind of go together. Um, Actually, no, I'll split them up. The first one is from Lowell. How young would you share your insights to men and boys about healthy masculinity, and who or whom should deliver the insights?
I think it can start at any age, and it's less about telling, more about showing. When boys are very young, uh, if you're just, it's a little bit of, I mean, it's parenting, I'm sure, or just like being an advisor to a child, but like policing a little bit wording, you know, like the B word or the way that men talk about women in movies or TV. Um, just having maybe them question it or you question it in front of them. Like, is that okay? Do you think that person feels good when you use that word or when they use that word towards them? But you know, if we're talking more about bystander intervention, like the rules of masculinity, bro code, etc. I think that should be part of sex education in middle school and high school. I think that is the most important time to be shifting mindsets, um, and into college as well, because those are also the times where we're, you know, those are the ages where we're testing out what is and isn't allowed. What is okay? Well, and people need to figure that out for themselves to a certain degree, but it should not go to the level of abuse and causing trauma.
Right.
And a lot of the time it just boys are only aware of finding their self-worth through conquest, sexual conquest. And so I think it's a little bit of letting them know that they're worth more than how much they're kissing girls or doing more like that's where I would start with a more serious conversation as a teenager.
Yeah, wow. And I love the idea of, sort of policing language even at a young age. The work I did, or a while ago, I did research in preschool classrooms, and it was just shocking to see how gender segregated their play was and everything, even with the teachers attempting to, switch things up and have different learning centers. It just was really wild how early that was being socialized.
It's
Okay.
hard. It's so hard, and like I'm
Yeah,
sure it can be overwhelming how many how new all of this is. I feel like that's men are so confused post Me Too.
right.
What are the rules? What can I do? That's why I think people have taken advantage of that for kind of this, to use the term, toxic masculinity. Like the getting his name now, but I mean, Joe Rogan's a big part of that, just kind of embracing the super masculine thing, because if you don't have any rules and somebody's giving you rules, well, at least that feels easier than I don't know what to do in this circumstance anymore. TV and movies taught me, to be a certain way.
Right. And it goes back to what Esther Perel said, and the idea of like why it's so important to be busting these myths and make sure we're all on the same page around what's appropriate and what's not. These two questions go together. The first question is, or it's, I'll pose it as a question. Could you share more examples of positive masculine conversations with females? And then the next question is, jumping off of that, what do you think women and girls should know about restrictive masculinity or the bro code? So I think in general, how does this apply to women, and what should we know about bro code?
Yeah, I mean, big surprise. The big inspirations and drivers in my life for changing my viewpoints around patriarchy, feminism, and the way I interact with women have been women, have been my romantic partners. And I feel very lucky for that. So and I'm sure this is a very valid complaint. A lot of women feel like, oh, great, another job that I have now to teach the men in my life how to treat me or how to treat other women. I don't know, another way out of that other than more guys talking about it. But I do think that for women, bringing these topics up to men in their lives, um, it, it is very important to not, I mean, it's like with anybody, like shame them right off the bat. I mean, shame can be powerful. It has been powerful to me in some ways, but it also can just drive people away and to hide those parts of them, and then it blows up later. So I think therapy, suggesting therapy is great, but other than that, just slight nudges of, here's a men's group, here's a community you could be a part of, here's a video I saw, here's a podcast I listened to, I thought it was really cool. Just because everyone's sensitive, but men are very sensitive. They don't show it very well, and they many times are cover up for it with this kind of a negative reaction. So I guess the other question was, what are examples of conversations you can have? I guess I kind of answered that, but I think that because we're influenced so much by the media that we take in, video games, I'm not a gamer, so I wish I had examples of games that convey positive masculinity. But I do think that, like, watching movies and TV shows that have a different, better, healthier perspective on masculinity is a great subtle way to kind of open up a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Watch Ted Lasso together. Or
Yes, Ted Lasso doing the work for sure.
my cousins and I we'll get on FaceTime and we'll play Overcooked together, which is a video game where you all are in a kitchen and you have to make, you have to get all the hamburgers or sushi or whatever it is ready together and make sure you get your orders in. And I'm not a big gamer, but I really love the collaborative nature of it, and it's so silly and fun. And it really, the more regular it's become, it really has it's become it feels like a really important part of our family now, this like
Mm.
game night that we get together and we're not just talking about how hard everything is, just the levity of it. Um,
Yes, I love that. I mean,
yeah,
it's yeah, and if you can't be together to play a board game, it's like
right,
that's a good way to do it. Love it.
right. Overcooked, the answer to all our problems. Okay,
Okay.
so this is not a question, but Avatar, The Last Airbender, and Legend of Korra also do great jobs with representation of masculinity. That's from Sean, and I would agree. I like both of those quite a bit. Um,
Thank you.
so this one also has to do with bro code. So it's a two-parter. The first part is, have the rules of the bro code changed or shifted since you've started this work? And then also, if you could imagine what a positive version of the bro code would look like, what would you put in there?
I'll answer the second one first. A positive version of the bro code looks like someone who is curious. Um, a guy who doesn't think that things have to be a certain way, and that's how it is. Like there's these beliefs, uh, false beliefs that there is a biological imperative around men's roles and women's roles. Yes, there are some biological differences for sure, but as far as like socialization and the fact that like men don't cook or men shouldn't be in the kitchen or what all those kind of outdated gender norms. If you're open and curious to changing the way you do things, that's positive masculinity. That's the first step. And then just otherwise educating yourself. I mean, talking to women about their experiences. I think a big one after Me Too that I still think a lot of guys probably haven't done or don't want to do is just asking their parents, aunts, family, wives, girlfriends, friends, uh, uh, that are women about their experience if they've ever had an experience that made them uncomfortable. Not a fun subject, but it's one of those things where you realize how many people have been affected by sexual harassment or abuse, and it makes you sit with that and go, have I ever made someone feel uncomfortable? Because I have done that, and I know I have. I know I've made women uncomfortable before, and that is the great part of this movement is going, whoa, okay, yeah, I remember that. Okay. And just making sure you don't do it and you look out for it around. Um, and so I think that's one way to kind of approach it.
Yeah, and to foster those conversations among men too is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And be
super.
open. I mean, that's the other part. Just like I try to be as open as possible about my own experiences in my videos so that nobody feels like this guy's just white knighting, preaching, to get attention or something. It's
Right.
like, no, I'm trying to be better and I'm sharing some of the things that I've experienced.
Yeah, powerful. This question is from Lowell also, asking about, are there differences among race and ethnicity when it comes to positive? And also I'll add into like just the bro code. How does it apply differently to marginalized men?
Yeah. I mean, this is a thing that I learned a lot again in Patriarchy Blues by Frederick Joseph. Intersectionality is a huge part of this work. Um, I mean, I think there are definitely differences in communication styles. I don't I don't try to address communities that are too far outside of my own experience because I don't think that's one fair or you know, I'm not well educated enough around those dynamics. And so but I've seen differences. People have been brought them up a lot. And it does come up, there's a lot of that whataboutism. It's like I'll point something out and they'll go, well, I've interacted with a Latino community that was like worse than that. And it's like, why don't you talk about that? I'm like, well, there's a lot of things to talk about, but I just think that universally being curious, empathetic, open, and ready to do a little bit of the work will help no matter who you are or where you come from.
Yeah. Absolutely. And recognizing your various privileges and how, yeah,
Yes.
all about intersectionality and all of the work we're doing. That's a great addition to this conversation. So my last question for you is, if you could actually, I said that and then one more question came in. Okay, so Chidori asked, can you name a few more books that you recommended? I know you've mentioned a few, and we will collect these as you're writing them down too and share them with you afterwards via email. But please share us your favorites.
I sure can. Okay, so Patriarchy Blues by Frederick Joseph, The Sexy Lie by Caroline Heldman, Boys and Sex by Peggy Orenstein, Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit,
Yes.
Macho Paradox by Jackson Katz. I mean, I wish I could go to my library. It's in the other room. That I think that'll be a good start.
Yeah, that's a great start.
Yeah, I think my biggest revelation about masculinity came when I read Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit. Like, she's an incredible writer. Her book also, The Mother of All Questions, just lovely
Yeah,
writing.
incredible. And I'm based in New Orleans, and the work she's done and the writing she's done around New Orleans post Katrina is also really incredible. Rebecca Solnit's awesome. Another question for you. This, I think you've answered this in different ways, but maybe you have some more specific examples of when you're talking to men in your life. Have you found anything helpful in bringing them into the conversation? So we've talked about watching TV together. Is there any sort of magic word or magic activity, or I don't know, any additional tips you have?
The magic is revealing something scary, vulnerable, something you've felt, something you've done. Because it opens a door and a path for somebody else to go, oh, wow, they're going there. Maybe, well, can I match that energy? Like, maybe I do have something I want to talk about. And then that just opens up the whole thing, I think. And it's important to not negate too much, and to be open and say, you're right. And I get that. That must be hard, that you're going through that. Like, all being a good friend or partner kind of language. Just shame is just the worst part of any of these scenarios. I learned that, I think, early on in my career doing videos about masculinity. I think I was a little more shame based. I was like, look at this gross thing that guys do, and all the guys who were doing the pickup artist stuff in the early 2000s, like, it's gross, and using terms like that. But it's like, well, no, they were lonely. They didn't know how to find romantic engagements. They didn't know. They found a book called The Game, and it gave them some rules and tactics, and they tried it, and maybe some of it worked. And they were kind of doing their best. It's not great. It was not empathetic. And that's what I talk about in the video. But I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, trying to take the pedal off of shame a little bit when approaching these conversations.
Right. Yeah. It's not that it wasn't ever gross or never caused harm, but that's also not how we're going to make change. Right. Yeah. Being strategic about how we call men in and how we accidentally how we disarm men and how we accidentally rearm them, I think is really helpful. And then
I like, oh, sorry. This is just my interview style, like on my podcast, that I love to get in there, and I visualize too when I'm talking to someone. If I want to connect or kind of draw something out for themselves, I can't attack their heart from the front. I can't go right at their heart, because they'll close up and they'll shield it right away. So I kind of, like, mentally, emotionally, I go around the back and go, like, can I touch your heart from your back in a way that's surprising you? And you go, oh, yes. No, I'm so happy I'm talking about this. I'm so happy I'm revealing this thing, because it's so important to me. It's such a big part of my life. So it's a bit of a dance. It's not easy, but it's worth it. That's what I mostly say.
yeah, I love how the rules of attacking and the rules of war we can use to call men in and reach their hearts. I think that's a beautiful flipping. Lowell says, thank you, Becca and Brad, for raising awareness toward positive masculinity. So yes, just wanted to
Thank you,
say that
Lowell.
out loud, and thank you all for being here. My next question is just, could you tell us a little bit more about the work you're doing and how can we all support you and where should we find you?
Sure. So I run a YouTube channel and a podcast called Real Feels. And it started out as conversations with friends, and then it evolved into focusing more on modern masculinity. And that's where you can see kind of my breadth of work. I have essays about Joe Rogan and Mr. Rogers and my favorite poet, even though he's super problematic and I don't agree with the way he does things, Charles Bukowski. I'm doing one soon, kind of addressing what's going on with the Nickelodeon shows and the documentary Quiet on Set. And so I try to just cover as much as I can, give resources, do research, and connect it to media, connect it to shows, connect it to movies, so that people go, oh yeah, that was Biff Tannen, from Back to the Future. Like, we know he's a bad guy, but like he really is a very clear trope of kind of menacing, sexually menacing men. And that still goes on today. And so it's stuff like that pops up. But so yeah, check out Real Feels wherever you get podcasts or on YouTube. And then you can contact me or kind of ask about speaking engagements, which is I speak on these topics all the time at bradgage.com. And then, or you just search my name on Instagram and you can find a lot of the same content as YouTube, but also sometimes just, you know, stuff for TikTok and the reels. Cause I am an editor and I like to make a really clean social video when I can.
I can confirm that your videos are clean and well done, and I highly recommend y'all follow Brad on social media. And Brad, it's just been a total pleasure to get to interview you today and learn about you. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for being here in the audience. This webinar has been recorded and will be uploaded online for you to share. And if you like this series, please keep tuning in. Same time on Thursdays. Next week, we have the pleasure of talking with Cam Fraser, who's a men's sex coach. Yes, thumbs up. So that's April 18th, the same time. Hope to see you. This is an incredible interview series, and I feel really grateful that I got to do this particular one with you, Brad. So thank you for being here and for your time.
Rebecca, thank you so much. Shout out to Cam, friend of mine. He's amazing. Can't wait for that one next week.
Woohoo. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.